thank you very much for taking the time. I really appreciate it. Obviously, yeah, I know you just released your album, what, not even 48 hours ago.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I imagine it's a bit of a hectic and busy time at the moment.
I mean, it's okay. I mean, like, I'm kind of like a one woman show right now, doing kind of everything. Lots of hands in different places. And so, yes, it's been a little crazy, but I do as much as I can manage, I guess.
Very nice. Well, let's start at the very, very beginning, if I can. So, how did you kind of get into music? I know obviously your grandfather was musical, but are your parents musical? And was there a light bulb moment when you said, music is going to be my thing in life?
Well, my grandfather, Tony Rais, his daughter is my mom, and it skipped a generation, the whole music thing. But she was very adamant that I take piano lessons as a child. So I started piano when I was 5 and a half. I actually started piano at the same time I started ballet because I was, as they say in Greek, agharbi, which means just like total loosey goosey tomboy all over the place, arms and legs. And the only thing that really stuck was the piano, obviously, because the ballet, I'm still agharbi. So just and so I continued with piano. I kind of did classical piano for a while, and then at some point when I was like 12 or 13, I was a really bad sight reader, just like I'm still a bad sight reader, just the worst. Um, and I remember I always had like these very intense Russian piano teachers. They're the best, but like they're intense. And so I would be playing like this Mozart piece, and I hadn't practiced because you know how it goes. I don't want to do that.
I do know all too well,
I,
actually.
I want to listen to Fantasy by Mariah Carey. I don't want to play Mozart. Anyway, so I was playing this piece and I hadn't practiced, and it's very obvious when you're a piano teacher when your student doesn't practice. And I get to this one passage that was new, and I just made it up. I just started doodling and just making it up. And my my piano teacher, she looks at me, she's like, "You can't do that. You're not Mozart, you know." And that's when I started writing songs.
Nice.
and so and so I started writing little songs then, and then in high school I started doing classical voice and doing more opera work. And at the same time, my compositions were getting a little crazy and out of hand, just doing like these these big like epic prog pop songs that would last like 7 or 8 minutes for no reason whatsoever. Like they didn't need to be that long. It's just like, when you're a teenager, everything, is big and expansive. And so it's intense. So then I went to college or university to study music, um, kind of against my parents' wishes. Like any kid who tells their parents I want to be a musician is like, especially when they're Greek parents, it's just like, now I'm in trouble. So I kind of, like, how can you started this, you started me with piano, you made me get all these lessons. Why are you acting surprised that now I want to do this for a living? Anywho, so so I went to study music, and then I switched majors to psychology because they finally got through and they're like, you need a job after this. Um, and then I went back for a master's degree in music composition because I couldn't do the psychology thing. Um, and I've just kind of been writing a lot of pop music, and since I've been doing collaborations with Stoup of Jedi Mind, which is this underground hip hop group. And so we have a group called Vespertina, and so I did that about, we have a record that came out about 10 years ago, and we have another one coming out maybe this year. And so that's completely a different realm. And now, recently, for the past 2 years, I've been getting into musical theater and doing a lot of that. And that mostly came about since I got accepted to the BMI Musical Theater Workshop here in New York, which is kind of a big deal. And I didn't expect to get in, but now I'm writing musical theater. So
Yeah.
I'm all over the place,
Well,
trying everything.
well, yeah, you do seem to have your thumb in various musical pies. And yeah, the BMI musical theatre is something that did kind of stand out to me about your career to date.
Yeah.
So how does it work exactly? And yeah, how exactly did you come to be involved with them?
With BMI?
Yeah.
Well, I had a couple of friends. Well, okay, so my pop music has always been of the dramatic ilk, let's say. Even when I was writing those like epic 7-8 minute prog pop songs, like I should have known something was up, you know. um, but I would play shows and I would play my 3-minute pop songs, and people would come up to me and be like, "That's great. Do you do musical theater?" And I get so offended. I'd be like, "No. How? Why would you think that?" I would be so offended. I don't know why. I just thought there was, I don't know, that I was like Glee Club kind of level, like that. That's how they were comparing me to. But then some friends of mine were like, "Have you heard of this BMI musical theater workshop?" And I was like, "No, and why would you tell me this?" And it's basically a workshop. It's a 2-year program. It's free, and it's very competitive because it's free. And it's hosted by two, um, I guess, professors who kind of give you very in-depth lectures and assignments for different kind of like musical theater type songs, situations. So I don't know. It looked interesting, and I was missing the sense of community, which I think doesn't really exist in like local pop music scene. I don't know how it is in Australia, and like if there's different hubs that are a little better at this. But here, even in New York, in like what you would think is like the epicenter of like the live music scene, I didn't really feel like there was a true sense of community for pop music. And so I was really missing this like collaborative environment, and just being in a room full of nerds who could just who could just like listen to your song and be like, "That's cool what you're doing there, but however, like what, you should think about doing this in the chorus," or like whatever. I won't get too technical because who wants to hear that. So I really just wanted to be in a room full of like super smart musicians, and I didn't think I would get in, but I sent in some music, and I said to myself, I sent in my pop songs, and I was like, well, if, if I get in, it will be because of the strength of the pop songs or the songs themselves. And somehow miraculously I got in as a composer. You can get in as either a composer or a lyricist. And just FYI, like to give you a sense of like who's been through this program, my hero, Alan Menken, who you may know as the composer of like all the classic Disney films, like The Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, Quasimodo, like all of the greats. He went through this program. You might also know Robert Lopez and Kirsten Anderson Lopez, who are both responsible for writing the music for Coco and Frozen. They actually met at this program. So a lot of people have come through and done really exceptional work. So it's been a dream. I can't imagine my life without it. And I'm writing musical theater now, and I love it.
Very nice. Well, Disney, here I come, she says.
Ooh! Yeah, let's call up Alan Menken, see what he thinks.
Hell yeah. Well, what's the worst that can happen? The worst that can happen is they'll say no.
That's true.
There you go. And yeah, you released your first mini musical, I guess you'd call it, just last year, called the masterpiece.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah,
Very bold beginning, yes, I know.
yeah, I actually quite liked it. It was quite fun. Yeah, about a sculptor gets their big break, and then their work gets displayed at a renowned gallery. What do you enjoy about musical theatre these days? And also, yeah, it's kind of, despite musical theatre being a huge industry, it's perhaps still not the most obvious path for a musician to take. So, what do you enjoy about it?
Whoa, where do I start? Well, the masterpiece, which is my very first mini musical composition, was the final presentation for the first year at BMI. So it was, they pair you up with a composer. Like composers get paired up with lyricists, and they do different assignments during the year. And at the end, they have this big final assignment, which is to write a 10-minute musical. And so I got uh, paired up with this amazing lyricist named Allison Light, who is actually incredible, and I can't believe I got to work with her. And she's so much younger than me. I'm so jealous. She's gonna have such a great career. Um, and so she and I kind of came back and forth, just talking about different things, and we came up with this idea of the masterpiece, kind of based on like the story of like the Emperor's New Clothes. And so just but that putting that in the art world. And so that was a lot of fun. I mean, we spent maybe like 3 months putting that together. And of course, it was during the pandemic when that first started. And, typically we would do this live. And so this had like this added element of difficulty, that we had to record it from like remotely, like everyone was doing their part remotely, and like putting it through mixing and all of that stuff, and still it's not like a perfect production. It was just kind of like we're putting it together for the sake of the presentation. And I just had such a good time writing it, and I was so sad when it was over. It was just such a bittersweet feeling. But I don't, I'm so new to the musical theater industry, and obviously now that Broadway is shut down, I don't have a chance to really go and see shows and like kind of be around those people. But I'm still in this class, and everyone is very connected to each other. It feels like a little family. And I'm learning as much as I can. I don't think even in my class, I'm like known as like the pop girl, the pop girl with the melodies. So I'm just learning. Honestly, I'm just a sponge at the moment.
Nice. Well, I enjoyed it, and I particularly enjoyed the little kind of tongue-in-cheek jab at the modern art world.
Good.
And yeah, with something like this, so you're working with a lyricist, you say. So how does it come together exactly? Are you handed lyrics and then you go off and try to write a melody? Do you give the music to the lyricist? How does it work?
Oh man, isn't that the age-old question? I guess for the masterpiece, or for a lot of these collaborations that I've had, it usually starts with a melody that I write. Melody for me is like the key to everything. And then it's like the central piece, and then everything else is just fluff, So if you have a good, strong melody, that's all you really need. And so I would start with a melody, I would send it over. She would send me some lyrics. We would go back and forth until it felt right, except for the last song, which is called Masterpiece, which she had just written already. She just had written some lyrics, a lot of them actually. I think she had written almost the whole song, and we were on a Zoom call because again, this is how we were collaborating, just like us now. Yeah, and so she's like, "Oh, check it out! I wrote some lyrics for the last song." So I opened the Google Doc and I saw it, and as soon as I saw the first phrase, I just started playing the melody, just at like live, like in the moment. It happened immediately, and that's never ever happened in my life. And I'd like to think that I mean, I wish all songs kind of work that way, but usually it's melody first. unless you have someone like Alison Light and she writes like the perfect melody driven lyrics, and you just figure it out on the spot.
Very nice. So obviously then we can expect to see and hear more musical and kind of theatre productions and collaborations from you. Would that be correct?
Absolutely, yeah. So the first year, like the last project was this 10-minute musical, and it was a bunch of like small songs that you would different assignments that you would get to do over the course of the first year. And then the second year is a little different because you get to work on a full show. So you usually the assignment is to adapt a film or a book or something that's already out there and musicalize it, and then you get to choose your lyricist, and at the end you get to showcase, I guess, a few songs from your big musical. And so I am working on that, and I'll send you an invite for May or June when the presentation's going to be.
Oh yeah, I look forward to it.
Yep. Aren't you going to ask me what I'm adapting?
Do tell.
I'm going to give you 3 clues.
Okay.
Okay. The first clue is that it's very Greek.
It's very Greek. Okay.
Okay.
That narrows it down.
Yes. 2, it has to do. It's a rom-com. And 3, let's say, don't be a vegetarian if you're going to be a part of this family.
Okay. The Greek musical rom-com, the only thing that I can possibly think of is Mamma Mia.
Oh, you're so close. That's already a musical, though.
Yeah, I know, but it's the only thing that comes to mind.
Come on, you're a Greek guy. I know you know this. It's a movie.
Zorba the Greek. I have no idea.
It has to do with a wedding. How about that?
Muriel's Wedding.
Oh my God. Okay, I'm just going to tell you.
Please do. We'll be here forever.
As much as I love ABBA, and it's clear that you do too, just with those 2 references, I'm adapting a musical version of My Big Fat Greek Wedding. Don't you feel silly?
Yes, I do. Yes, it seems the most obvious thing, but yes, it didn't come to mind.
I'm sure your listeners are screaming.
Yeah, they would be, absolutely.
So, I mean, it's just for fun, we're just kind of like, and everyone is kind of working on like some different kind of movie or book. And so, this is just for fun, like don't tell Nia just yet, but.
Well, you've got to make sure you include the Windex line in there.
Oh, yeah. I mean.
Windex fixes everything.
That's true. And I think that should be a song in itself. I love
that I'd like to hear.
Maybe ode. A percussive element,
An ode to Windex. I like it.
Sounds mesmerizing already.
Yeah. Hey, I'm just full of ideas. What can I say?
We'll have a separate call to discuss.
Yeah, it's probably not a good idea. Anyway, so another project that you've been involved with is The Good Johnsons with Dan Keller, who produced your latest album, and we'll get to your latest album in just a little bit. But yeah, how did The Good Johnsons come together?
So The Good Johnsons originally started as the complete opposite of what it became, which is like, I guess 10 years ago now. The Good Johnsons was an idea that I had about playing covers from modern covers, but doing them in a jazzy, old school way, kind of like, I guess, what became like Postmodern Jukebox, if you've heard of them. So this was before them, FYI. And so we tried to do that, and it kind of worked. It was a duo, and I think at some point we added a drummer. So it was kind of like a little trio jazzy project. But then we soon realized that neither I nor Dan are very good jazz instrumentalists. But by then, we kind of found ourselves in Japan, and we had lost our drummer because our drummer didn't come, and people were very interested in the Good Johnsons over there and in that music and that style. And we were like, why don't we just play a show? And then we were like, yeah, but we don't have a drummer. What do we do? And so, and so Dan spent like, I want to say like a month turning our set into this complete electronic J-pop version. So we kind of flipped it. So instead of like now we were playing jazz covers of modern songs, we did like electro lounge covers of Tom Jones and like the Carpenters and like the Mamas and the Papas. So we just completely flipped it around, and that was way more comfortable for us. And so he produced all the songs, and all we had to do was just play one instrument live and have a backing track. And we just had a ton of fun. We toured in Japan. We played a few festivals, played some local spots, and it was just like we just had a total blast. It was like completely different than what I was doing, which was like sad music with Vespertina, and it was like it just crazy zany fun J-pop.
Nice. Well, yeah, sounds like necessity was the mother of invention.
Exactly.
Very nice. And yeah, you've released 2 albums from what I can see under the Good Johnsons moniker, and yeah, they're, as you say, they're kind of oldies reinterpreted in trip hop, electro pop. The songs seem to lend themselves quite easily to the trip hop, electro pop style. Was it as easy as it sounds? And were there any songs that you tried that didn't work?
Well, you definitely have to ask Dan, because he is kind of like the genius behind all of this. Like, I would just show up and lay down vocal tracks. It was very easy for me to do that. But I think, for him, it's really, if it's not working in his head, he won't bother working on it, I guess. He's also a person who's just like one of these crazy geniuses who's like very quiet, but just like there's like a lot of stuff going on. What's crazy, I think, is like when he writes music or when he produces music and like writes it, he'll never really sing it out loud. I find this crazy because like I'm always like na, 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 like over and over again until I get something that works. I'm like the worst neighbor you could ever have, in that sense. But for him, it just happens like internally, and there's like this years working, and he just puts it on the page or he puts it on the session, and it's done. So he was able to put all of that together, and I mean, we both kind of like would come up with like songs that we think might work. Some of them didn't really work, and I can't remember which ones those were, but he would take some they don't matter, you know what I mean? They didn't make it, they got cut, they don't matter. But there's so many more songs that could possibly lend themselves to this like insane electropop styling. So hopefully we'll continue that at some point. I think we've just both been busy with other side projects, but I do love the Good Johnsons. It's a fun time.
Okay, let's move on to, the latest album, which was just released, not even 48 hours ago. So how does it feel to have it out there finally?
It feels good. It's something that we worked on for a while. I mean, just like the research element, I started like 7 years ago at this point, and the real hustle to get it together was last year during also the pandemic, just so like a lot of remote work. And that was very intense. And I was actually thinking when I released it, I was like, I don't know how we actually finish this. Like, it's a kind of a miracle. Because nothing gets really, like, nothing really gets done these days. It's really hard. So I'm really proud that it's out there. I'm proud of the team that helped put it together. You know, all the musicians and artists and engineers. Just couldn't have done it without like them.
Nice. And yeah, just to kind of clarify for people that will be listening in, τα καμένα σουξέ του Tony Rais, or in English, Lost Hits of Tony Rais. And yeah, the blurb to the album says, the album started as a 70th birthday gift to my mum, or mom. I need to get the correct pronunciation. But quickly spiraled into much more. After years of research of archives, music libraries, and speaking with collectors, my brother and I discovered the sheet music for 10 songs Tony Rais sang in the 30s and 40s. So how aware were you that your grandfather was a performer?
I mean, I knew he was a singer and a performer back in the day. I mean, my mom really, I'm telling you, I think she really glossed over the fact that he was kind of a bigger deal than I thought he was. You know, she would say, "Oh, and your grandfather would sing at, you know, at these clubs." And I'd be like, "Okay, I sing at clubs. What's the big deal?" I don't know. I mean, I would see photos and he was very handsome and that was like, yeah, cool vibes. But I didn't, you know, because there weren't any recordings or any, there wasn't any music or anything. Like, I didn't really think too much on it. I just kind of thought he was a performer for a little while, and then that was kind of it. But of course, that changed when I did, just by chance, I did like a Google search for his name, and I got 2 hits. And the first hit was a Greek Wikipedia article that mentioned his name in passing, and I was like, "Oh, look at that!" Like, just having your name like in Wikipedia is like pretty legit. I don't even know if I'm on Wikipedia, maybe, but like to have someone from the 30s, that's pretty intense. So I was like, okay, so it's kind of serious. And then the other hit was at the the Library of Greece, the Music Library of Greece, called Lilian Voudouri, and it was a link through a link through a link that got me to a page that was an archive of the sheet music cover, the cover of a sheet music. And I opened it up, and it was the, you know, there's like a sheet music cover, and it had his portrait on it, and I was like, what? And then I thought, well, hold on, does that mean there's sheet music out there, and is there more? So the sheet music itself wasn't on the website, and you know, I had to go in person and to the library and see if they had it. I was so excited. And so I was like, you know, kind of like a musical archaeologist, kind of like digging through paper. And so I got a copy of the sheet music, and I got home and I plugged in, because I was staying with my mom at the time, so I didn't want her to find out for some reason. I'm a very secretive person over here. So I plugged in my headphones to the keyboard, and measure by measure, I just started playing the song. And it was the, you know, like a music archaeologist, I was discovering the melody and the chords and the lyrics for the very first time, measure by measure. And it was a tango. Καλύτερα να μη σε γνώριζα. Better had I never met you. And so that's a tango, and it's you know, it's good. It doesn't exactly pull on the heartstrings, but it's good. And so I just kind of left it there for a while, and I didn't really think about it much until years later, when I got this idea of like, maybe I should record this song for my mom at some point. And then I was like, wait, maybe there's more. so then so then I got my brother roped into it, my brother Pedro, who is a historian, thankfully, um, who can do kind of that kind of work for me, with a smile on his face. Although I have to say it was really fun. He helped me because he also lives in Greece, so he helped me kind of track some of these songs down, and we were talking to different libraries, archives, collectors, even on Facebook, just like weird groups, I don't know, just spiraling down the internet wormhole. until we finally got 10 songs. And it was 10 songs that he definitely sang, either like his portrait is on the cover, or, you know, there's like some sort of inscription dedicated to him. And yeah, and I was like, well, might as well record these songs. They haven't been recorded before. So that's kind of how that started.
Yeah, that's really, really cool. And I mean, how did you even know where to start searching for these other songs?
Chris, I don't even, it's a blur. It's, I mean, it started off, there's actually a really cool website called where there's like a lot of old info. I'm gonna tell you what it is. It's um, in English characters, baya.kithara.gr. And this was a collection from this guy called Panos Mavrogiannis, who was a collector of all this kind of sheet music, old sheet music from the 30s and 40s, and I think he collected up until his death. And he had this vast collection um, of 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 sheet music that thankfully was archived online. That's not really something that you see a lot with Greek things, you know, like with Greek music or just with Greek and any sort of like historical documented, like you have to be there in person. And so the only thing that's on there though is just kind of the information. So it's like it'll tell you the title, the lyricist, composer, perhaps who sang it, the performer, and the date that it was released, and maybe like a little inscription. So it didn't include anything other than that. So then it was like taking that and seeing, okay, like now that this person has passed away, where has this archive gone? Who has it? Who has the physical copies? And then, you know, just going to libraries. And like I said, just like I would find like YouTube videos of people who like this kind of music, and I would ask them and they would refer me to someone else. I mean, it was just like, I don't know what I'm doing. I was just kind of like in the dark, like taking stabs in the dark, hoping someone will lead me to the right way. And I'm sure there's more songs. You know, we were just able to find 10.
I was actually
Yeah,
going to ask that question. I mean, are these 10 songs the definitive collection? What is the likelihood that there's more if you keep digging?
there's at least one more that I haven't been able to locate. Um,
Okay.
it's called Pes Mu Enane. If anyone knows where that is, let your girl know. Um, but there's got to be more. But then, you know, when you think about it, these are songs that, you know, they have his portrait on the cover because back in the day in the 30s and 40s, you know, you would go out to a club to see a specific performer uh, sing a specific song. So he made these songs famous, or they were written for him to perform live. And so these were kind of like, you know, like his repertoire songs. So beyond that, I'm sure he sang other things. Um, and I also assume he was singing other songs that were written for him. I just don't know if I will find them.
Yeah, I guess at the same time, it took 7 years or so to track down and record 10 songs. So trying to find another 10 songs in another 7 years might be a bit of a project.
See you in 10 years.
Yeah. I guess it depends on whether you want to go down that rabbit hole or not.
Hmm. I mean, yeah, I'm still open to it, you know, if anyone has info. And I'm still talking with, you know, archivists and collectors and things. So everyone's kind of keeping an eye out.
Nice. And yeah, it the thing that kind of interests me as such is that the 30s, 20s, 30s, 40s, you know, we're told Athens was all about rebetika and bouzouki and those kinds of styles.
Hmm.
The music that that you've found from your grandfather is nothing like that. So yeah, do you know just how popular this style was in Athens at the time?
Yeah. So at the time, this is post-war Greece, and Greece is like recovering from the war, and they're very poor. And what happened was, there was two musical influences that happened at the same time. And the first one is rebetika, which most people associate with Greek music. And rebetika is like kind of like an Asia Minor influence, um, both like tonally, like music, but also in instruments. So you have like the bouzouki, you have lauto, you have baglama, you have all of those instruments that are like, when you think of Greek music, like those are the instruments that you think of, clarino, right? And so that was happening on one side, but this was kind of like, you have to think that like when the original rebetika first started, this was like the music of the poor people, poor struggling folk, who were kind of like, if you think about it, it's kind of like the blues of Greece. I've heard it said, it's like bad boy music. So you're talking like the music is like talking about like drugs. It's talking about being in prison. It's talking about like, it's not particularly romantic. It's just talking about struggle, and it's talking about hardships. And that kind of music at the time, I think was almost suppressed because it was like inappropriate, at the time. But there was a huge following, because a lot of people were poor and struggling. It makes sense. But at the same time, what was happening, I call it like the East versus West kind of thing. What was happening at the same time was a similar, I guess, influx of what's the word, influence from like Europe. So like there was like this French influence, this like Italian influence, this Spanish influence, and almost kind of like this feeling that like you wanted to be somewhere else. There was even like Hawaiian style influence, just like world music, let's say. And that came through at the same time, and that's what's known as Old Athens music, or Palιά Athena. And that music was romantic, and it was, based on piano and guitar and kind of like early jazz instruments. And it was kind of like more for like the bohemians and the romantics, and possibly more rich folk, although like I wouldn't say people were rich back then, but just like maybe better off.
Better off.
So yeah, so that was happening at the very same time. So you had like bad boy music on one hand, and then you had like romantic bohemian music on the other hand. So
The upper class, I guess.
Yeah, take your pick, and then eventually, what happened is like what happens always with music is like they eventually merged together in Greek music, and you have things like etechno, music, and like even when you listen to music today, Greek music today, there's a little bit of both. There's like this pop influence, right, and then there's also the bouzouki element, so nice. I don't know. I'd like to say we all came together at some point.
For the songs of Tony Rais to have existed in notation, obviously, he was quite well known. And you say, I saw in another interview, you said he was invited to sing at the Royal Palace as well, which is no mean feat.
Mm-hmm.
So do you know, I mean, obviously, yeah.
The Greek Royal Palace, by the way.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, he wasn't going to like Buckingham. Okay. I just wanted to remind everyone that Greece had a monarchy for
period of time, yeah. But yes, despite all of that, you don't hear the name Tony Rais. Was it just because? Was it just because his career unfortunately ended so early? Was there a particular reason, the songs seem to have faded and the name seems to have faded?
Well, yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of like the tragic story of Tony Rais and why nobody knows who he is now. which is because we don't have his recordings. And the reason why we don't have his recordings is because back in the 30s and 40s, like I said, this was post-war Greece and people were still financially and everything else recovering. And so if you wanted to record an album back in the day, it cost a lot of money. I'm not even sure that the equipment was available yet in Greece. And so a lot of people would go overseas, like to the US, and record, like they would come to Astoria, for example, in New York. There was some like local labels here, and they would record here and then go back. And of course, if you don't have that kind of money, you can't, there's no way. And so, Tony Rais, his career was really taking off and he was like a true rising star. And just, I think I want to say like right in the 50s, just when I guess he was able to maybe record some of these songs, he was tragically diagnosed with throat cancer and back in the day, the only way to help that situation, I guess, was to remove the vocal cords entirely. And so, I mean, it saved his life, but it ruined his career. And without recordings of these songs, no one has been able to hear them for over 70 years. And so it makes sense that, of course, no one knows these songs and no one knows Tony Rais. And so that was kind of a big reason why I wanted to bring it back. And these songs are just so beautiful. And my mom hadn't heard these songs before. My mom hadn't even heard my grandfather's voice, like his speaking voice, before. He was speaking with a machine for most of his life. So this is kind of like the big reason why I felt like I really needed to do this and bring these songs back to life.
Yeah, it really is a tragic story.
With a happy ending, I hope.
Well, I was just going to say, but now the world gets to hear them, which is an absolutely great thing. And I guess the next obvious question to ask is, has your mum heard the recordings and what does she think of them?
Yeah, so I mean, part of the reason why we're like taka trying to get all these songs recorded during quarantine is because her 70th birthday was coming up in November. And so I mean, I didn't get her anything else, but I wanted to get her like something big. And what bigger way than to do this 7-year project? And so I, before I released anything or any information, I kept this all a secret, which was very hard to do because my mom's always asking me what I'm doing and how's your music going?
Typical Greek parents wanting to know everything.
Exactly. Well, you know how it is. Mom, I'm anyway. So finally, I was on her birthday. We, I mean, again, I wish I could have been there with her because she's in Greece. And so we had a Zoom call. I had to create a different video, just explaining to her what she was about to receive. Because if I just plopped it out, like here's a CD, it wouldn't have made sense, but it needed a bit of explanation, and she was obviously so moved and just so touched. Yeah, she was super emotional, just like I thought.
That's awesome.
And now we have this family heirloom that we can we can pass down, or people can listen to and also be a part of.
And you say that you and Dan Wilson, your collaborator on the project, worked to I'll kind of quote it exactly. You say, bring the songs back to life with fresh instrumentations that respected and highlighted the original ensemble. So I was kind of wondering how detailed the scores were in terms of instrumentation and how much room for interpretation was there from yourself.
Yeah, so we really talked a lot about what the time period sounded like. What, we really wanted to, at first it was just going to be piano and voice, and we would have kept it really simple. But, I tend to dream big and just go there, whether I finish projects or not. That's why it's kind of like a miracle that this is done. And so we would talk about like, okay, well, if we were going to see Tony Rais perform at one of these places like Imadra Tuatik, which is a pretty famous place, what would it have been like? What kind of instrumentations would have it been like? And it really depends. I think it's very piano heavy. There's obviously room for string quartets and clarinet, flute, like kind of like if you think of like the golden age of Hollywood, kind of like Fred Astaire style, where it's just kind of like these sweeping strings and just like this very romantic music, like very early jazz maybe kind of music. And so we would talk a lot about that. And each song is a little different with its arrangement. We have like the first track, "Δεν Σ'αφήνω, Μου Φύγεις," is kind of like this big lush arrangement of there's strings, there's harp, there's flutes and alto sax, and there's just like all this stuff going on. And then there's other songs where it's just like piano and clarinet, and so there's room for interpretation. But we tried to stick true to what we thought it might sound like, but kind of like give it a little bit of our own fresh spin.
Yeah, it's the sound reminds me very much of kind of the jazz crooners, Rat Pack kind of thing, which is a sound I absolutely love.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, I'm kind of conscious of time. I don't want to take up too much of your time. So I guess let's end it with what else. You mentioned that you have a musical in progress that you're writing. What else do you currently kind of have in the works, and what is next with regards to the album that you've just released?
Well, musically, what else I'm working on aside from the musical is the second album for Vespertina, with my collaborator Stoup of Jedi Mind Tricks, and that's more of like a trip hop pop project, and so that's kind of in its final-ish stages. We're still like kind of like writing and finishing up some things. I'm very excited about it. I think the songs, it's completely different than what I've been doing. It's kind of like forward-thinking pop, and I'm very excited about it. And the concept, there's a bit of a concept to it, which is, I guess I should say, like, the first album was also a concept album, and the first album is called The Waiting Wolf, and it's based loosely around the story of Scheherazade and 1001 Arabian Nights. And then, like I said, big dreams.
Big ideas.
Big ideas.
There is nothing wrong with that at all.
Yeah. And so the kind of like the overarching theme of the second album is this idea of being an aging musician and what it feels like to look back and your old self and where you thought you'd be and where you actually are, and what that particular feeling feels like. And I know, like, I think it's everyone relates to this feeling in some sort of way. You don't have to be a musician, but I think especially as a musician, or an artist, there are different levels of things that are going on inside of one body. You're like a musician, you're partly a musician, but you're also like this person who's living in like this capitalist world and has to pay bills and has to make money somehow, and it's very hard to do that as a musician. So maybe you also have a day job. Maybe you do, I don't know, finance during the day, or you're an engineer or do something else, or you're a waitress or something. And then if you're a woman, there's also a third part of you, which is if you decide to become a mother, and those are three people that are kind of opposites to each other, who are all fighting for your time in your body. And so it's kind of about that feeling, which is like hashtag I'm in my 30s. so that's kind of like the vibe of this one. But I think I think it will resonate with people. I don't think it's an alien idea for non-musicians at all. I think we all look back and think of like, you know, what our hopes and dreams were and where we hoped we would be, and look back and we're like, who was that person? You
What
know,
could have been.
what could have been? Yeah. And so I don't know, trying to put a positive spin on it too, but like kind of like exploring those ideas
Nice.
of futures. And so there's that, which is the Vespertina album that will hopefully come out, I want to say like in the summer or end of year, hopefully. Um, and then, you know, I'm trying to finish up just some of these songs for the musical as a showcase. As far as this album, the next step, I don't expect to make any money off of this. Like this was completely self-financed. I don't know how I even managed to do that during a pandemic as a musician, but you know, it was really important for me that I get this music out there and that people get to listen to Tony Rice's music. So right now it's kind of like in your hands, like in your listeners' hands, and you know, the world's hands. What, you know, up to you what you want to do with it. It's out. Listen to it. I hope you like it.
Well, I thank you very, very much for your time. I really do appreciate it. And
Thank
yes, I do enjoy the album and I do enjoy what you do.
thank you so much, and this was so fun. Thank you for having me.